You can have a legitimate policy debate over how to respond to undocumented immigration. That's a policy debate that's been going on for decades. There's nothing new about that debate. But what is new is the caliber of the response that Trump has unleashed. The fact that he is turning hardworking people into criminals, the fact that he is taking away people's legal status. So a lot of this, we're saying, well, they're undocumented, they shouldn't have come in the first place. A lot of the people Trump's targeting are people who have legal status. They're asylum seekers. They're people who are here on temporary parole status or temporary, all these different humanitarian status that give you admission temporarily. They're people who under Biden and other presidents received paperwork so that they could work and live in this country. And now suddenly that legal status is being yanked away. They're being declared illegal and they're being targeted, not because they're inherently criminal, but because Trump doesn't like where they're from, basically. So yes, that is going to trigger protests, and it should trigger protests, as should the way that politicians are being treated by Trump. Look at the way that Senator Alex Padilla earlier this week was, manhandled, shoved to the ground and handcuffed by federal agents when he'd already identified himself as being US Senator Alex Padilla. I mean, there is stuff going on that anybody with a moral compass should think, this is outside the bounds of the possible. This is outside the bounds of the norm, and we're going to have to express our dissent. That's not un-American. That's quintessentially American to express dissent at a moment like this.
Yeah, and it's very American to have immigration as well. I want to tie in something you said too. But go ahead first.
No, go on.
You mentioned that Trump doesn't like these people. I think there's a discussion on the right, maybe 2016, 2020-ish, that said, hey, look, we're not against immigration. We're not against immigrants. We're against illegal immigration, That was the whole talking point on the right, I feel like, back then. But now I'm seeing people like Charlie Kirk, people like Matt Walsh, these right-wing conservative pundits say that actually we should stop immigration from the third world, which I feel like is just a different way to say we should stop black and brown people from coming here.
It's a rise of a white nationalist agenda that's always been a part of the American story. I mean, look, we can romanticize the past, but if we're romanticizing the past, then we're, whitewashing the fact that we had legislation specifically banning Chinese migration. We're whitewashing the fact we had a racial caste system and slavery. There are so many problematic, deeply problematic aspects of American history when it comes to race. There's nothing new about anti-immigrant advocates basically saying we want immigration to be a white, affluent thing only. What is new about it is that in the recent past, in living memory since 1965, when the immigration system was changed, which is 60 years ago, for 60 years we've had a relatively humane immigration system that emphasizes family unification. So if one person's here, there are abilities to bring other people in. We've had a system that doesn't sort of blanketly ban people from certain parts of the world. And now all of that's being reversed. So we have the Muslim travel ban, which is, been resurrected. It's not called a Muslim travel ban anymore, but there are 17 countries now where we've essentially banished travel to and from. There are countries where we're basically saying we don't want your students to come in. There are countries where we're saying, well, we think you're a danger, whether it's through terrorism or through politics or whatever it might be. So we're going to have extreme visa vetting. All of this stuff is an excuse to just lock down the country more and more and more. And at the end of the day, we lose. I mean, look, this country has been made magnificent by having open immigration, or not entirely open, but by having an extensive, wide-ranging immigration system. It's brought talent, it's brought dreams, it's brought a cultural melting pot. It's so enriched us in so many different ways. And, this idea that we're going to lock down, well, yes, we can lock ourselves down, but we're no longer going to have the best universities in the world if we do. We can lock ourselves down, but we'll no longer have, all the dynamism that comes with entrepreneurs and technology specialists and everyone else who's made America their home and made America the home for their inventions and their businesses. We can do all of these things. We'll just make ourselves culturally and in the long run economically poorer, and certainly morally poorer. If you send masked agents in and you rip families apart, there is no doubt at the end of the day we become morally impoverished by that.
I completely agree. Taking a zoom out for a second on the origins of American racism, what do you think is the reason why people are racist here? We have a racist subculture here. It's a tough question, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you can make the argument that America was founded right from the get-go on racial hierarchies. It's a pretty compelling argument. I mean, this is a country that was founded using chattel slavery and the labor that came with chattel slavery as a sort of core part of its identity. Now, obviously, we're not a static country, and this country in 2025 is dramatically different from what the country was like 250 years ago, or pre-independence in the earlier 18th and 17th centuries. But we have a long history of viewing the world through racial lenses in this country. And we have a long history of dividing our economy, at least in part, via racial caste systems. So we've had this well of labor at the bottom of the economy for, not just 5 or 10 years, but for many, decades, maybe centuries, that relies at least in part on undocumented labor at the bottom of the economy that provides this sort of cheap well of farm workers, factory workers, construction workers, and so on. There's nothing new about that. Again, what happens every so often, every few decades, you get a very nativist movement springing up. So you saw it in the 1870s and 80s, and it led to the anti-Chinese legislation. You saw it in the 1920s after a decade or two of very high immigration, and it led to the complete lockdown of the immigration process. You saw it in the late 1930s when there was this move against admitting refugees from war-torn Europe. So we do see these nativist movements crop up. Trump is just harvesting them particularly effectively. He's a particularly, I don't think he's intelligent in sort of a classical intellectual sense, but he's got political smarts. He knows how to harness, for the most demagogic of ends, he knows how to harness people's fears and how not just to harvest them, but to accelerate them. And he's very, very good at accelerating fears around immigration. So you saw it in this sort of crazy thing in the election campaign where he's talking about Haitian immigrants eating people's pets. Yeah. You see it today. The DHS and ICE and these other agencies are putting out, essentially proto-fascist literature warning people about invaders, foreign invaders. And there's this poster doing the rounds, an Uncle Sam poster that they're circulating at the moment, which warns about foreign invaders and tells everybody to, get involved in rooting out the foreign invaders. Well, that's slave hunting by another name. I mean, when you literally encourage millions and millions of Americans to go on a hunt against people they suspect of being undocumented, and when you then redefine the undocumented not as desperate poor people looking for a safe harbor, but as invaders. It's classic authoritarian iconography. You can't get more classically authoritarian than that. It's the use of the state for the most naked propaganda purposes. So, again, I think he's harvesting old themes that have appeared in America throughout its history, but he's using them in a new and particularly effective way.
And do you feel like the reason why they're effective now is because of his messaging, his charisma, or do you think it's because of maybe economic factors or personality factors? What do you think is the reason why it's...
all of the above. Someone like Trump only becomes possible in an era of deep economic and cultural uncertainty. If America's working class was satisfied, confident, secure of the future, if America's middle class was secure in the future, people like Trump would be laughed out of the house. They gain credibility in a moment of uncertainty. And we've had that. We've had 50 years of just cascading economic inequality. If you look at the bottom part of the economy, they're worse off today in real terms than they were in Nixon's era. That's 50 years ago. So you've had this collapse of certainty, and then a series of events like the crash of 2007, 8, 9, which decimated the housing market and left an awful lot of people losing their life savings, losing the security of their homes. Well, again, that's calculated to sow resentment. The forever wars, from 2001 onwards, again, one can argue the merits or demerits of those decisions in Afghanistan, Iraq, and so on, but they left a huge legacy of bitterness and a huge number of people who felt that they were just being used and then sort of thrown away. And Trump exploits that. Now, the whole thing is an illusion. He's a grifter. He doesn't really care about working class Americans. He doesn't really care about veterans or anything else. You're seeing that in the way that the Doge cut's being implemented. Anyone who really cared about veterans wouldn't be cutting 80,000 jobs from the VA. But he has this illusion, this ability to say, I'm the strong man who's going to make your lives better again. And not everyone believes him, but a significant percentage believe him. And, as you saw with Hitler's rise in the 1930s in Germany, you don't actually need a majority of a population to support a demagogue. You just need a well-organized minority. And Trump has that well-organized minority, and he has the ecosystem, the media ecosystem, the legal ecosystem. He's got this sort of infrastructure now built in to basically amplify anything he says. and it gives this sort of illusion of invulnerability. And actually, I don't think Trump's invulnerable at all. I think he's, in the grand scheme of things, he's a weak, small man. He's scared of his own shadow. I mean, only people who are scared of their own shadows fixate on things like military parades. But there is an illusion that he is an invulnerable, strong man. And as long as that illusion holds, he's going to be able to do damage.